As Henry strolled into the living room, wine glasses in one hand and a bottle of Shiraz in the other, he was relieved and excited for a quiet night with his wife. Things had been rocky between the couple recently, so some focused together time was certainly in need. But as Henry dimmed the living room lights and went to place the glasses on the coffee table, he saw his wife engaging in her new nightly ritual. She had the baby monitor glued to her ear, straining to hear phantom noises from within their baby's bedroom. "Louise, put the monitor down," Henry sighed as he poured the wine. His wife replied with an emphatic shh as she waved her free hand. "Louise, the baby is asleep. Leave the monitor alone. Please." Henry was trying to be patient. He understood his wife was going through unimaginable stress as a mother. He knew her hormones were all over the place, her anxiety was real, and the exhaustion of parenthood had them both fried. He tried to be supportive, but this obsession with listening to the baby sleep was too much. "There!" Louise squeaked, gesturing for Henry to come listen. "I can hear them." "Louise, there's no one there. The baby is asleep. I just checked on them myself." "Henry, please listen." With a massive exhale and half an eye roll, Henry joined his wife on the sofa and put his ear up to the monitor. Together, the couple sat, listening to nothing. After a minute, Henry began to rise, but his wife pulled him down, motioning to the monitor. Being a good sport, Henry sat and returned to listening to the silence of their youngest child's bedroom. Another agonizing couple of minutes of nothingness passed before, very faintly, in the background, Henry heard a small hiss. Probably just the baby breathing, but Louise had perked up and was gesticulating wildly. Henry placated her with a calm down gesture that they used with their toddler. As Louise settled beside him, the hissing stopped, replaced with muted murmurs. Louise's eyes were wide. She mouthed, "I told you so." But as the strings of unintelligible words flowed through the monitor, Henry grabbed the device. Surely it was just radio interference. He turned the device off and then back on again, but the voices still came through. He gave the monitor a good whack with the palm of his hand. No change. There were certainly voices mixed in with the steady rise and fall of the baby's breathing. "Someone's in there, Henry. Someone is with the baby." "Louise, I was just up there, and the house is locked. It's got to be interference." However, there was definitely another voice coming through the monitor. But surely it wasn't coming from the baby's room. That wasn't possible, right? The couple sat in silence, trying to decipher the words coming through the monitor, straining to put meaning to sound. All of a sudden, there was a melody to the whispers. Someone was singing a nursery rhyme. The couple looked at each other in sheer horror, the color draining from their faces, as they listened to their baby sit up in bed, giggle, and begin to sing along. friends, it's Becca. For the past 5 years, the West London Witch team has been dedicated to bringing you the best supernatural stories at the highest studio quality. And by team, I mean me and my buddy Danny. We do this work totally for free because we love it. We're proud of our content and appreciate the wonderful interactions we get to have with storytellers and listeners just like yourself. If you're enjoying the West London Witch, maybe consider joining our Patreon. It's a way to further engage with us and show your support for two creatives. If you're in a position to spare enough each month for us to grab a cup of coffee in between edits or add to the piggy bank for a new microphone, we would love to see you in our Patreon community. But I know times are tough, so if you're not in a position to join Patreon right now, that's okay. We aren't going anywhere. Head on over to patreon.com/The West London Witch. For as little as £1, $1, €1 a month, you can gain full access to our coven, a space where we share behind-the-scenes stories, dive deeper into each episode, answer your questions, and have special little treats to thank you for sharing your love and kindness with your favorite little witch. Hello and welcome to episode 99 of The West London Witch, a podcast where we share stories about those moments where we find ourselves very much not alone. Growing up is hard. Navigating friendships, complex family dynamics, school, and don't forget puberty, is challenging for all of us. But what happens when you mix in grief, loss, and a haunted house? Today, Tharyn shares with us what life in the most haunted house in Bucks County, Pennsylvania looked like. But the house isn't the whole story, because the reason why Tharyn knows the house is haunted is because they have an incredible gift. Tharyn is a psychic medium. They always have been. But growing up as a medium in a haunted house with a parent who does not know and cannot understand their child's gifts was no easy journey. This is the story of many dead people and one very alive child trying to navigate the land of the living and the dead all by themselves. This is a story full of terror, misunderstanding, confusion, high horror, and ultimately, self-realization. I'm Rebecca Strazina, and this is The West London Witch, Episode 99, My Dead Friend.
There are many times in the current context when I sit here knowing what I can do, who I am, and what I've become over time. There are moments where I reflect back to what brought me to this point in my life, where this experience that I've gained comes from, how it's affected me into the work that I do today with communicating with spirits, connecting with others, and giving space for them to share their own experiences. Sometimes when I sit back and I think, wow, what a long journey it's been, I also think about the parts that were not so easy, more terrifying, dark, but also fascinating in their own way. And a lot of that comes from where I grew up, a very small town in a very small place on a very busy river with a lot of people knowing your business, but really not wanting to know what's actually going on in the walls of what is called the most haunted house in Bucks County, Pennsylvania.
Tharyn was born into this Bucks County home. Their experiences with the paranormal predate even their own memory. When Tharyn was a baby, their parents would put them to bed and switch on the baby monitor. But as they sat downstairs eating supper or relaxing in front of the TV, they would hear voices in the monitor. Initially, they thought it was radio interference. But upon closer inspection, they realized the voices were speaking to Tharyn, and their child was babbling back replies. Of course, they would run up and check on their baby, but there was no one there. The room was empty. Tharyn was safe. There really wasn't anything the parents could do.
Over time, as I grew, I did start to notice something was off. I would say cognizantly in about that 3 to 4 range, though as silly as it may sound for a toddler to be very aware, one feeling specifically always came to mind before I'd go to bed. I was nervous. There was something happening in my space pretty consistently. I would hear tapping on the window. I would hear shuffling in the closet. And I used to tell my mom, I can't sleep because that guy keeps talking to me.
Tharyn's mother was, of course, naturally concerned and protective, but there truly was no one there. She would lay with her child and reassure them, but as terrified as Tharyn may have been, all their mother could see was a perfectly ordinary child's bedroom.
But even at a young age, I couldn't sleep. I had weird dreams. I would walk around my house and hear weird noises. But things changed very dramatically for me at a very young age. My family suffered a devastating loss. We unfortunately lost our patriarch of our family, as well as my brother within a few weeks of each other. And the house flew into intense chaos. But something strange happened a few months later. I started to hear things, but it wasn't just noises. It was a voice of what sounded like a young girl calling for help. Now, in the moment that it happened, I assumed, oh, that must be my mom. I called to her. She asked me, what do you want? Well, you called me. No, I didn't. Go back to bed. Okay. I go back to bed. I hear the voice again. I get up again. Mom, what? What do you need? I get yelled at again to go to bed. She was getting very frustrated with me. I could hear it in her voice. I didn't really want to test it, so I went back into my room and I thought for a minute, and that's somebody else that might be talking to me, somebody else in the house, maybe my sister. So I said, who are you? They said, I live here. I need your help. I said, I can't help you. It's bedtime. But who are you? They didn't really answer. They just said, I need your help. They emphasized mine.
Tharyn was only 5 years old. They weren't afraid or upset. The person speaking to them was just as real and visceral as their own family. Tharyn just knew that they couldn't help them, as it was bedtime. Confusion was the main feeling.
Afterwards, I started to feel things. I feel watched. I feel like I'm not alone, but I am alone. I'm in my own room. I'm playing with my toys, but it seems like someone's sitting with me. Somebody is playing with me. And I would see things in my mind. Now, imagination, kids have those. They're very specifically crazy when they're kids. But what I was seeing was my own space with somebody else in it. A young girl dressed in clothes that I didn't recognize, long hair, hands on her knees, watching me. Did I see her with my eyes? No. But I saw her in my mind. And I remember trying to speak to her and not really understanding how she was speaking, because it would feel like something was happening between us, but I couldn't quantify it. So she would just show me that she wanted one of the dolls or something of that nature, and I would make space for her to do that. As we started to see each other more, then I started to understand how to relate by speaking out loud, just asking questions. Like, what are you doing here? I died here, she says, with her full voice. Oh, what are you doing here, though? If you're dead, what are you doing here? Well, I died here And I'm here because I have to be.
This was a very confusing concept for Tharyn. They know what dead means. It means dad and brother are never coming home. They are gone forever. But here, this girl is telling Tharyn that she too is dead and is living in the house.
Eventually, she also mentioned that she was buried under my house and her body's still there. And to remind, I'm 5 years old. So I just accepted that as something that was going on. I said, okay, I don't know what I'm supposed to do about that.
Tharyn did what all 5-year-olds do when they need help. They went to their mom. Tharyn told her that their friend was buried under the house. But Tharyn's mom was dealing with a lot. 2 huge deaths back to back. Still raising her other children, trying to navigate this new world as a grieving single parent. She didn't have the time or mental bandwidth for these stories.
She said that was silly and my imagination was getting away from me. But that specific spirit was very communicative. I would hear her movements from her dresses and it would swish when she would walk. So I would hear her coming down the hallway to come into my room. I would feel her presence before I'd see her presence. And she would tell me all sorts of interesting things. She would say, your mom's mad at you because you did this, but you don't know that she's mad yet. There's a ghost on the staircase that doesn't like you very much. There's a lady in the attic. There's this spirit. There's that spirit, like a warning for what I'm about to come into. I assumed to some capacity that I made her up. But I called her my dead friend because that's what she told me she was.
As Tharyn got older, their abilities to sense and communicate with the mysteries of their house grew.
Not only am I hearing things, perceiving things, seeing things in my mind, but now I see them with my eyes. Seeing images of shadows walking in the hallway, watching people move out of the corner of my eye, seeing full bodies of people just standing there like they lived there too. And when I would blink, they were gone. Now, you may think, what could you do in that situation? You must have been so scared. I wasn't. I accepted that something weird was happening in the sense of, well, this must be something people can just do when they get older. And I'm doing it, so I'm just going to keep doing it.
Tharyn began to make notes about the people they saw. They drew pictures of the spirits. They made notes about where and when they saw them. Sometimes the ghost told Tharyn their names, where they lived, how they died. Sometimes they told them historical facts and even stories about the house itself. But as Tharyn got older, they began to realize that ghosts were a lot like people. Some were just there to talk and be heard, and others derived joy and satisfaction from creating and exploiting fear.
At the time I was about 10, I was having some pretty intense nightmares fairly often. Now, I had my ghost friend, or my dead friend, as I've said, and we would play through the house, and she would let me know when people were getting too active. She also told me about places I shouldn't go. Don't go into the attic. Don't get out of your bed after dark. Watch out for this. Watch out for that. And I took those warnings, and I held on to them, even in my early, 10s to early teens. Around me, the adults in my life, they didn't want to hear it. They didn't want to see it. They didn't want to talk about it. I didn't know that it is commonplace for people to be called crazy when they talk about things that they experience in this regard. I was unaware that what I was doing was wrong in some way. All I knew was there were these people dressed in clothes that I didn't recognize that said they lived in my house, but all died before the year that we're living in currently. So when they would say things, I would share them. Hey, did you know that something bad happened here? Oh, hey, They told me that you were feeling this way. They told me you were feeling that way. I would share memories of things I wasn't even alive for because they were there when they happened. Oftentimes, I would be met with, there's no way you could know that. How do you know that? Or who told you that?
The adults did not have space for this in their lives. Tharyn was regarded as a creative child with an overactive imagination who was just really good at telling stories. That was it. End of conversation. Although Tharyn knew there was more to this situation, they also knew they could not talk about it to the adults in their life. This was something Tharyn was going to have to navigate alone.
Growing up was not easy. Growing up was not sunshine and butterflies, or we all came together in a time of strife and supported each other. We became islands, all in charge of our own selves, all needing to grow up very fast. There was no peacefulness in that. And the spiritual energy mimicked that in its own way. I mentioned by 10, I'm having nightmares. Crazy. And as I turned into a teen, they got more intense. The experiences got even worse. Things were getting scary. One of the first, most terrifying things that ever happened to me happened at 4:00 in the morning. I heard a very light knocking on my door, sat up in bed, very frustrated. I call out to the knocker and ask, "What do you want?" But they don't answer. They just keep knocking. Now I'm even more frustrated because either you didn't hear me or you're ignoring me. So please, it's 4:00 in the morning. What could you possibly want at this point? No response. And now I feel a little confused. You had to have heard me. So I ask again, who is it? Now that tender tapping, knock, 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 is now knock, knock, knock. Well, that's definitely not who I thought it was. I get up, I move away from the door. I call out one last time. Hello? And then that knocking turns into banging. So hard, the top of my door is bending from the force. I don't know how my door held up, as it's just bang, 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 bang.
This was so violent, Tharyn was convinced it was a robber or someone that had broken into the home with malintent. The ghosts had never acted like this before.
What do I do? I can't defend myself. What do I do? But then I felt a strange peacefulness rise inside of me. And it was like I lost control of my own self. And I decided I'm going to open the door. I was moving before I could stop it. I put my hand on the lock. I unlatch it. The door flies open. And there is nobody there.
Astonished, Tharyn looked down the hall, but it was empty. They were alone, and all was quiet and still. Confused, Tharyn got back into bed. Never before had the spirits been so aggressive, so physically active. The next morning, Tharyn asked their mother and sister if they had heard anything in the night. But they just looked at them with vacant expressions and shook their heads. But it was from that door incident onwards that the activity really began to elevate.
It was very often I would be disrupted by loud music through the house. Very old music. You would hear slamming doors, thumping footsteps. You would hear people call your name in the middle of the day when you were by yourself. You would see things moved around that shouldn't be moved around. You would find things missing out of your room, even though the door was locked. And where you would find those things later would be in the places you were told not to go. The attic, the basement, or maybe even in the garage if they were feeling really froggy about it. I asked multiple times, do you experience this too? Mom, sister, please give me something here. My mother decided that I was losing it. There was no way that this was happening. She really moved away from it. And when I told her that I was concerned, that I felt something meant me harm in the house, she said, that's not possible. There's only 2 people that haunt this house, and they would never do that to you. She's referring to my father and my brother who passed away when I was a kid. If there were 2 people that I never saw, it was them.
Tharyn may not have been able to communicate with their family, but the spirits were telling them all sorts of things. And over time, Tharyn learned more about the property itself. They had been told by the spirits multiple times over the years that the home had been a business, a hotel and boarding house. Tharyn later confirmed that this was in fact true. The home was a hotel built in 1883, and that was something Tharyn would have never looked into if it had not been for the ghosts.
They said that the house itself has bad aura. Business doesn't do well there, and that it was just a looming thing in the middle of town. Anyone else around you will tell you, I can't believe people live there. That house was abandoned multiple times by owners of its business, as well as people who lived there. I have had the privilege of speaking to the granddaughter of an old owner. And when I said to her, oh, I live there now, can you tell me a little bit about what your grandparents' experience was like in that house? She said to me, we don't talk about that house. I have nothing to go on here. All these ghosts telling me this, that, the other. And no one can give me anything to prove that they're even there. I'm just this small, newly budded, trying to figure it out psychic medium, just existing in this space.
But no matter how much or how little Tharyn knew, the activity persisted.
One of the second most terrifying things that I ever experienced was waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning. This is a theme. I woke up afraid, startled. There is something going on. Something is about to happen. It's 4 o'clock in the morning. The show is about to start. I look around my room. I am anxious to see what is going to take. Oh, there it is. There is a darkness in the corner. It is very tall. My room is dark. But even in that darkness, it stood out as its own entity. And I locked my eyes to it, prepared. I see you. I know you're there. So whatever you do now, I will watch it happen. It begins to drift. As it begins to drift, the light coming from the streetlights in the windows stops coming into the room. It moves so slowly, so agonizingly. It felt like it took hours for it to finally make it. Passing by the second window where, again, it blocked the street light from coming through. And it stopped at the base of my bed. For some reason, I looked down, which was a very grave error, because as I'm looking down, I see the bed begin to compress, as if something's putting weight on it. As my eyes drift back up, this shapeless figure now looks like a head with shoulders, with 2 large hands reaching directly towards my neck. I don't remember what I felt other than I have to turn the light on. So I scrambled behind me, which meant taking my attention away from what's coming towards me to turn on the light to get a glimpse of what this thing is that's trying to do this, and there's nothing there. It disappears.
As Tharyn sat there, shaking on the bed, they received a sort of psychic flash. The name Edward came to them. But who was Edward? Tharyn had never met him before. What did he want? And why was he so terrifying?
I thought for a moment about how I was going to proceed. I was afraid to turn the light off. I didn't want him to come back. I truly believed that if I turned the light off, he was going to return. So I slept with the light on for 3 months. For that specifically, I did ask some of the ghosts that I was friendly with who he was. And they said, oh, he was a really weird man. He used to work here. They described him as being very strange, tall, thin, and had a proclivity for a certain type of working woman that used to stay in the boarding house. He found himself quite enamored with their profession. And one ghost in specific said, she can't remember for sure, but she's pretty certain that's why she's a ghost now.
That was Tharyn's one and only encounter with Edward. Tharyn recorded the event and tried to move on. But Edward was not the only one who desperately wanted attention.
A lot of people ask me in these retellings that I offer, who was the scariest ghost you encountered in your house? That was a being that I like to call Nightmare Man. Why such a cozy nickname, you may ask? Well, Nightmare Man first visited me in a nightmare, specifically. He made his presence known by attacking me in a dream. I was walking into the basement. Remember, the basement is a place we do not go. We don't go in the basement. But I, in my dream, decided I'm going down into the basement. And I hear scratching on the walls, which is strange, considering the walls are stone. When I get to the bottom of the staircase, I think, no, I don't want to do this. This sounds like a bad idea. And as I turn around to leave, I go up the stairs, and the wall in front of me at the foot of the staircase bursts open with debris flying everywhere, dust all over the room. I'm coughing, I fall, I almost slip back down the staircase. I can't breathe. I feel like I just got hit with a bunch of rocks. And in that dust, as it settles and moves, there's a figure. A very tattered, corpse-looking man who steps out with a rotten-toothed smile. I could not turn around fast enough to try to get to the top of the stairs, but I didn't make it. He leapt and grabbed me and pulled me down to face him. His eyes are sunken in, his skin is gray. You can see the cheekbones and the dust that's accumulating on all of the creasing in his skin. His teeth are rotten and pulled back. He gets very close to me and says in my ear in a very hoarse voice, "You will never wake up from your nightmares." And I woke up immediately after, but I couldn't stay awake. I was fighting for my life to keep my eyes open, and I wound up drifting back to sleep. After that, I had another dream where I was shoved up into the corner of my room on the ceiling, looking down to see a shadowy figure standing over my bed with its hand on my head.
Nightmare Man took the cake. He was horrifying, sinister, malicious, and seemingly, at best, out to frighten Tharyn, and at worst, to hurt them. Tharyn went to the other spirits and asked them who this man was. But it was all quiet on the Western Front. No one would speak up.
But it turns out that he was real. I'd spoken to him a few times very long after the fact. He told me he was buried in the walls. The reason he's stuck in the house is because he can't escape, and that it is his personal job to make me feel miserable because he hates me.
As new ghostly characters were unlocked, the activity continued. And the fear never ceased.
In the midst of all these experiences, all of this terrifying encounters, I'm still hearing and experiencing and desperately trying to understand how is it I'm perceiving it in the way that I am. Now, it's about the late 90s, the early 2000s, is about that time where psychics became very popular on talk shows. If you all remember Miss Cleo, Call Me Now, she was one of my first introductions into psychics. Now, that's not what I was doing. That's all right. Sylvia Brown, she was a little closer to what I was handling, but we are not the same, so I must just be weird about it.
In addition to being introduced to TV psychics, Tharyn also discovered documentaries about ghosts on the History Channel. Now, this was really fascinating, but a lot of those stories featured faraway haunted castles or tragic battlefields, not family homes in Bucks County, Pennsylvania.
But a lot of those ghosts come from specific reasons, usually trauma related. I was murdered in this house. Not all of my ghosts were murdered. Some of them just like to be here. Some hauntings come from horrible things happening. Well, I don't have anything to go off of. The house is just a house to me. Yes, it's a hotel, so they say, but like I don't have anything to go on here. Now, in the later teen years, it was a little more manageable. By that point, I was just annoyed. Some of the highlights of that were hearing a ghost couple argue in the basement. It was a man and a woman just constantly fighting with each other about marital issues. I remember telling my mom about this specifically. It's like, I can't focus because these two people are just yelling at each other and I don't know what to do. And that's when I heard a word that I'd never heard before up until this point. My mom said, that sounds like schizophrenia to me.
Tharyn had no idea what schizophrenia was. Their mother told them that her grandmother had it and that she had to be committed. If Tharyn wasn't careful, they too would suffer the same fate. If Tharyn wasn't reserved and withdrawn before, now all the talk of ghosts and spirits went completely underground.
I had a few friends that I could trust to talk to about it specifically, but overall, I didn't have any support to figure it out or to even make sense of it with insight. The internet was still in its infancy by this point. There were really no ways to look up how to shield, how to do this, how to cleanse.
Fortunately, help was on the way. One of Tharyn's friends suggested that they get in touch with a paranormal investigation group, a team who could come in and validate with evidence Tharyn's claims.
So I go to my mom. I said, Mom, I want to have a paranormal investigation team come into my house. She looks at me. This house isn't haunted. Yes, it is. She said, what are you going to do for it? I said, what is on the table? She said, if they don't find anything, then I need you to agree to allow me to commit you. Deal. I put my life on the line to have these people come in, to investigate, to see, and to experience it. And by the gods themselves, they experienced it. Photographs, EVPs, personal encounters. They were having such a profound experience in the house that they said it was one of the most haunted places that they'd ever experienced. When they brought the evidence forward, I almost cried. We got an EVP of a man and a woman arguing with each other in the basement. We got EVPs of people talking about the hotel itself and wanting alcohol. There was EVPs of people saying, leave me alone. But something that came out of that investigation is probably one of the last pieces of things that I needed vindication on. They had a psychic that they brought with them. She was a very lovely lady, but I was not allowed to speak to her until after it was over. She said, don't talk to me, don't tell me anything. Just let me do my thing. At the end of the night, when they were closing down, she approached me. She pulls me aside. She goes, I need to talk to you about something. She said, there is a man in this basement that really doesn't like you. She described him as having gnarly, rotted teeth, very gaunt, corpse-like, tattered, dusty clothes, and he was very focused on me. Now, at one juncture during the investigation, they invited me to sit in the basement. I saw his shadow crawl across the floor. It came up to me, and he just looked at me like he knew what this was all about, that he wanted to make sure that I was discomforted in that basement. I had to get to leave.
Tharyn fell into a puddle of tears. For years, Tharyn had convinced themselves that the nightmare man was just that, a nightmare. But now this psychic medium was cautioning them not to go into the basement and definitely not engage with this spirit.
I'm happy to say now, though, he's afraid of me. I have squared up with him a couple of times. When I visited the house at one point, I saw him for the first time in so long, standing in front of me in the hallway by the kitchen. He looked at me, he smiled, he looked exactly the same. He tilted his head in that really strange, grotesque way and then skittered off to the basement. You know what I did? I followed him. I went down into the basement and said, "What do you want?" And he said, "Aren't you afraid?" I was like, "I haven't been afraid of you in years. Is there something I can help you with?" He did try to remind me that I was worthless and that I will never be stronger than him. He was very disappointed to find out that that was not true anymore.
The investigation may have proved that the house was haunted. But what about Tharyn? Did they ever get any validation that their gifts were real?
There is a book that you can read about the town that I grew up in. It's called Ghosts in the Veil. There's two versions of this. There's the first and the second. Ghosts in the Veil was written by what was our local pastor at the time. He was fascinated by the hauntings of our entire house and the entire town itself. We were interviewed for the second book, and he came into the house and wanted to hear ghost stories. So me, my sister, my mom all sat with him at the table. He starts with, "So what kind of stories would you like to share?" So I immediately start telling him everything that I know with all the documentation and pictures that I have and who is who and what their names are and what they've done and what they've told me and what they've shown me. And to the point that both my mother and my sister are quite shocked and perplexed. My sister looks at me at one point in my conversation with the pastor and says, "How did you know that?" I was like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "I didn't tell you that. I didn't tell anybody that. How did you know that that's what happened?" I was like, "Because they told me."
So, what was Tharyn's sister so upset about? It had to do with the dead friend. You see, before Tharyn was even born, their sister and half-sister had used a Ouija board in the house and had connected with a little girl who said that she had been buried beneath the house. The sister had never told anyone about this experience and was horrified to hear Tharyn relay the entire story in detail.
The pastor himself was actually very, very helpful in some of the things that I related to him. I was like, this event and this event and this event and this event. He'd already done a little bit of research. And he was like, "Oh, yeah, that's accurate. That actually happened. It was in the newspaper at this date. Oh, like this too." He's like, "I've only ever seen this in one specific place of information. How did you get it?" Because they told me.
Tharyn was delighted to have even more of their experiences validated. There was historical proof that backed up the tales relayed to them by the ghosts. But what about Tharyn's dead friend? Were they ever able to locate her? What was her story? And why was she still in the house? According to Tharyn, the dead friend told them that her name was Samantha and had once lived in a nearby town with her mother and father. However, at one point her father had disappeared, and her mother began seeing a new gentleman. That man took issue with Samantha and killed her in order to live a childless life with her mother. Samantha said that the man then dumped her murdered body in the cistern under the hotel. Hence, why she told Tharyn that she was buried under the house. Interestingly, Tharyn did find the house that Samantha said that she lived in and could find records of her parents, but not of Samantha herself. However, Tharyn believes that Samantha came to them as a sort of spirit guide, there to help Tharyn on their psychic journey and through the turmoil of the home. But the question still remains, what is going on in this house? Why is it such a hotbed of activity?
Essentially, the house was very popular. It ran as a hotel for 50 years. In the basement, there used to be a tavern. There was food, there was drink. There's cigars you could smoke. Everybody went to the house on their off days. It was in the middle of town. It was very easy to get to from any direction. So now I know the house is just its own space. It is a free spot to come to. It is a place to congregate. And it always has been, and likely it always will be. The power comes from knowing that you can protect yourself and be empowered by your own willpower when you're dealing with them in the sense of them being ghosts.
The house is still haunted. The ghosts still very much reside within its walls. And so does Tharyn's family. The home now belongs to Tharyn's sister, and life continues on. The experiences are ongoing, but through the greater understanding the family has gleaned from decades in the house, it's now a space where both the living and the dead can coexist.
We've learned to live together more so. We've learned to exist in that space because we understand each other a little bit better. And I am happy to say, out of such a horrid, long, terrifying haunting, the best thing is that I came out of the other side even more powerful than when I went in.
Tharyn has continued to explore, expand, and refine their gifts. Tharyn is now a full-time psychic medium, helping both the living and the dead to connect, be seen, heard, and understood. It's been a long and arduous journey, but one that Tharyn shares with pride. And I, for one, am so very thankful that Tharyn has allowed us to share this incredible journey on our platform, The West London Witch. If you'd like to see more of Tharyn's work and hear even more stories, check out Tharyn Beyond the Veil on all the socials. If you'd like to hear more from my interview, head on over to the West London Witch Patreon for an exclusive Coven conversation. And before I leave you today, I just want to take a quick pause to recognize that this is our 99th episode. On Halloween night, episode 100 will go live. So join us on October 31st for a truly massive milestone in the West London Witch Anthology. Do you have a spooky story you'd like to share? I'd love to hear it. Drop me an email at thewestlondonwitch@gmail.com or find us on Instagram and Facebook at The West London Witch. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. And come and follow us for additional content on Instagram and Facebook. Until next time, merry meet, merry part, and merry meet again. The West London Witch is created by me, Rebecca Strazina. Our sound designer and production magician is the incredible Danny Cross. Our theme music was bespokely written and performed by the wickedly talented Kyle Hall. Our cover art is the beautiful collaboration between Lizzie Wilson and Jake Bowser. Special thanks to Miss Sinead Bowers, our quality control and biggest cheerleader. And thank you to you, all of our listeners all over the world. These are your stories. Thank you for sharing them with us.